I'd like to introduce Major Aaron Krenz. Aaron, I've known Aaron since we went to OCS together, class 42 up at Camp Ripley. Our class started out with 57, we graduated 12. So, and of the 12,
that's one time for tough.
I know, yeah, it is. That's right. So 10 of us are still in, 5 of us are full-time. So it's been great, number one, being friends with Aaron and getting to know him, but also that he bailed me out on this whole speaker thing because I had my speaker lined up. He's going on the division deployment. So then I called up my backup speaker. He's going on the division deployment. So last week I called up Aaron. I said, Aaron, I really need you to help me out. And he gladly accepted the mission. So thank you, Aaron.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Aaron.
General Erlinson, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks again for the opportunity to come here and speak to you. I just, as General Erlinson and I were speaking before this meeting, it's just really a challenge over the last 4 days putting this together, but really trying to remember what you did 10 years ago. It's been a little over 10 years ago now since we deployed, and really understanding what we did and how far things have come. Just want to highlight here, I don't have a digital picture of this, but this is a picture of Alpha Battery when we were at Fort Dix. It was a 152 soldier battery, but this is how dated this is. There wasn't panoramic cameras back then, so if you really count, there's about 175 soldiers in that picture because they snapped it in increments and then piecemealed it together. So it looks pretty impressive. But so I get a couple extra pictures of my soldiers that had the honor of leading in Iraq. So a little bit of background on the development of Alpha Battery and why we deployed back in early 2004, about April time frame. Minnesota received a notification of sourcing for 3 in lieu of military police companies and a rear area operations center, which is a RAOC, kind of a mayor's cell, so to speak, for one of the camps, Camp Taji. So the 151 headquarters provided the RAOC piece to this, and then Apache Company out of one of the 194, headquartered out of Brainerd, was the commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Pazernik now, and then a Charlie Battery commanded by Major Troy Fink, and then myself as the Alpha Battery Commander. These in lieu of military police companies were 152 soldiers strong, and a typical battery is right around 100, so we had to take our Bravo battery and split those 2 platoons up, and we also took some soldiers from then the DeVarty and the Fist and some other folks. So it was really a conglomerate of several different units to make up the one battery. And as noted, September 2004 is really the month we mobilized to prepare to deploy, and we returned in November 2005. Am I locked up here? There we go. Just give you a quick agenda, cover the mobilization deployment, some of our mission and the unit alignment, the weapon systems and equipment. Again, it'll probably date this again. And then the police training and operations that we conducted, the enemy threats. Again, looking back, I'll talk about the time period in our Operation Iraqi Freedom and what was evolving as far as the threats go, and then some of our unit accomplishments, and I'll open it up for any questions. There we go. So our mobilization, Marshall, Minnesota is the headquarters of Alpha Battery. We mobilized from there on 17 September and flew to Fort Dix, New Jersey, which was really the power projection platform for a lot of these in lieu of military police companies. We arrived there and began our soldier readiness processing. And really, from a standpoint of going through this for the first time as a young captain, it was eye-opening. And you really didn't know what right looked like, except that you were on their training schedule and trying to become military police officers. We went from wearing our BDUs, dark colors, to the stark contrast of the DCU. And it was kind of a little bit of hodgepodge because of the fielding of the Gore-Tex coats and the IBA, individual body armor. Some of them were, again, BDU versus the camouflage. But over the course of our deployment, we were all fielded the DCU colored camouflage. Particularly coming from field artillery, many of our drivers were used to 5 tons and some of those types of vehicles, but our primary vehicles were the M1114 up-armored Humvees, and then also the armored security vehicles. However, we didn't see those until we actually got into Iraq. Many of the training tasks that we did are typical military police. However, what I found was that much of the training was tailored based on the TTPs that were coming back from theater. So it wasn't necessarily the doctrine that the military police follow. And how I became enlightened of this is really our parent unit out of the 720th MP Battalion out of Fort Hood, Texas, an active duty MP battalion came, their S3 came down, and we're looking at the training plans, and he's a little discouraging because he said, boy, if you conduct a TCP like that, you're all going to die. And I was like, oh, that's good news. So really it was the instructors and the trainers, you know, they were doing their best, but they were basing their training and experience off of folks that had just gotten back or had limited experience or returned from deployment early, and they were trying to get those soldiers and leaders that had immediately come back and be able to share those experiences and their insights. One of the rare occurrences as we went through the MOB site at Fort Dix, when we mobilized with 152 soldiers, we were probably about the 120th unit that had gone through that MOB site. Because of the preparation here in Minnesota and the pre-SRPs and the health and just sometimes sheer luck, we actually mobilized and deployed the exact same number of soldiers as we mobilized with, which until then it had never been done before. So, and I just highlight this. We were on track, and we completed all of our training about a week early, and it was nice timing because it landed that week of kind of limbo, landed over Thanksgiving weekend. And ironically, one of our soldiers ran into a New York firefighter who was a guardsman out of New York and happened to be at Fort Dix at the time. And he said, well, you know, my reserve fire crew and our fire station lost 9 firemen during 9/11. And if you guys are all going to be here, we'd love to host you in our fire station over Thanksgiving. So we took buses to Ground Zero, got to tour Ground Zero, and then tour the fire station, and they have a huge memorial there to honor their firefighters, and they had basically a buffet for Thanksgiving dinner. So we filed in by platoon, and it was one of the most amazing Thanksgiving dinners I think I've ever had. So our deployment to Baghdad, and as this unfolded, our parent unit, the 720th MP Battalion, were giving us a little more detail. And prior to actually deploying, they flew myself as the commander down to Fort Hood and gave us a classified briefing as to what area of the country, and specifically Baghdad, we would be assigned to, and really more clarity on what our mission was. And initially it was obviously to provide some combat platforms to maneuver units, but ultimately training Iraqi police. But the commander said, we're going to Baghdad. We're going to be located down here at Camp Rustamaya, which at the time held about 2,500 soldiers. It was a previous Iraqi army training camp. And the whole east side, southeast side of Baghdad would primarily be our area of responsibility. And so it was really an eye-opening enlightenment about what that is and why that's so challenging, and I'll get into that in just a little bit. But primarily the green areas, as we looked at, you know, what our environment is, and the green is primarily the Shia neighborhoods, and you see just a little bit of pockets of Christian neighborhoods. But the red is primarily where the Sunnis lived, and then we were kind of caught in a crossfire of different types of enemy threats. So our mission in unit alignment was to provide military police combat power and platforms to maneuver units that were in the area of operation, and then also enhance the Iraqi police capabilities. And there was a big push for this because of the upcoming first democratic Iraqi election. And so we needed to make sure that their capabilities were such that they could be the face of security around the voting sites and throughout the streets of Baghdad. And then U.S. forces could be inside either the police stations but out of sight, so it doesn't look like we have any type of influence on this. When we arrived, we were initially OPCON, or operational control, by the 3rd Brigade Combat Team of 1st Cavalry Division. And so the brigade commander tasked us with making sure that our Iraqi police within his sector met certain criteria, and all these tasks were completed. Now, as citizen soldiers, the majority of us, or all of us, very few had any law enforcement background. We had some deputy sheriffs, we had some city police officers. Thankfully, there was civilian contracted police officers that rode along with us that actually helped train the Iraqi police in the technical aspects of law enforcement, and where we provided kind of a security around the edge, or helped them go on patrols and kind of gave them the confidence to do that. I want to highlight the 720th MP Battalion, or Task Force Gauntlet. To this date, Colonel Robert Teradash was the former battalion commander. He holds the, I guess, the record for the most soldiers commanded at a battalion level in combat. It was over 1,400. So at that particular time, and his battalion made up of half of his organic MP companies, a detachment of the 313th out of Las Vegas. But we had Charlie Battery, Alpha Battery, Captain Fink, Major Fink and I, and then we had Captain Scott Myers out of the Michigan National Guard, and then Scott Munch out of Kentucky was another FA battery converted to an in lieu military police company. So half the task force was field artillerymen performing a military police mission. Our primary weapons and vehicles, because we had a diverse area in the southeast Baghdad, we had the very inner city of the Qarada Peninsula, and then lower Al Madain to the south, and then very rural areas where there was some police stations out there that really needed some build-up and support and recruiting. Not much change as far as the personal weapon of the 9mm. We deployed with the M16 initially, and it was very apparent. We were, you could always tell the National Guard soldier, because he's the one carrying the big long M16, and all the active duty components that were there were all M4s. And what really that said to the enemy is they could point you out just by the weapon that you're carrying. And so what I really like to talk and brag about Minnesota is the fact that we expressed our concern back to the state of Minnesota, gave them basically an operational needs statement on why it's important, because it wasn't just that they could tell us, but it was really a safety factor, getting in, mounting and dismounting outside in a Humvee. It was just a matter of time before it was going to be a negligent discharge. Thankfully, we didn't have one, but it was just cumbersome to get in and out of these vehicles, and especially that armored security vehicle up here. So we transitioned, and our battalion commander couldn't believe it. Within, basically, I think 2 months of us putting the request in comes that shipment of brand spanking new M4s. And, they would had to wipe them down. There was still oil and all sorts of stuff on them, but they worked excellent. The M240 Bravo, exceptional weapon system for that type of urban area. Could easily dismount, but also reduce the likelihood of collateral damage if fired in an urban area. We usually went two 240 Bravos, one in the front vehicle, one in the rear, with a 50 cal in the center, just for that show of force. But very rarely was that 50 cal used in the urban area. Same with the Mark 19 grenade launcher. We didn't typically take that into the inner city. It was usually in the rural areas where we needed to reach out and touch someone if need be. The Warlock, when we got there, these were not on our Humvees, but as the threat changed and this capability to protect our soldiers was developed, we fielded them, and then it changed our TTPs too. Before, we would try to drive as fast as we can, have a good spread of vehicles just to make sure that we couldn't be targeted and one shot could affect 2 or 3 vehicles. What this did is it clustered us up in 3 vehicle convoys, and you had a bubble based on what this protection this provided of about 50 meters, 50 to 70 meters in front and 50 to 70 meters behind. So you condensed your convoy a bit, but you also were able to jam any type of radio or phone signals when they were trying to detonate. The other piece that was fielded when we were there, and really what I saw is that some soldiers had improvised this before it actually became kind of patented, but they would have this arm out with some just chains dangling that had been bolted on there, and because of the passive infrared, it would trigger that and the IED would go off, hopefully before the vehicle actually got there. So really that risk mitigation to these. The Iraqi police training, as I alluded to a little bit earlier, was our primary, it really ended up being our primary mission, because it was really this teach, coach, and mentor type of mentality to get them and build their capability. We conducted enormous amounts of key leader engagements with the Iraqi district commanders, paired the platoon leaders up with the station commanders, and it really helped build that relationship. And the challenge is to establish that quickly so that we could begin our path, because they were so used to units rotating in and out. It was the relationships that were cut short and promises not kept. So our soldiers would sit and listen, help instruct, and kind of push them to do the things that they needed to get done in order to be successful in preparation for the elections as well. Kind of taught them how to look for tag ordnance and weapons caches that were discovered, and that police training interrogation on where and why they had been being collected. So and also the security of them, because there's many times where we'd collect a cache of weapons, and the next day about a third of them were still there. So they'd take them back home, or probably end up back on the street and shooting at coalition forces or friendlies. The Tigris River Patrol, this was a unique challenge for us because we couldn't go on the boats with our IBAs just because of a safety factor, but they were so inept that when we first got there, they couldn't even get their boat to come out of the plane because their engines were so corroded and just out of service. So by working with the Navy that was in the area, they had folks that could come out there and help teach them the maintenance required on the engines, and just technical nautical things that naval personnel would be able to teach them instead of us. We also fielded brand new Chevy Trailblazers, and this was also just a unique challenge because they're so used to just driving them into the ground and then just leaving maintenance to go. And so, we were like, look, our taxpayers are paying for this stuff. We need to teach you how to maintain them, sustain them, and then also just how to use them, show a force, but also don't shoot rounds through the floorboards either. And that's where our weapons training came into effect, because it was just such a sad event. But we had some pickup trucks and Iraqis out there, and they're really anxious and excited to go. And they don't put the weapon on safe, and before they bring their weapon up, they're spraying their own guys and falling all the back of the pickup. And it was horrible, but you know what? It taught them a valuable lesson of the importance of weapons training, and our soldiers did a fantastic job. They constructed weapons ranges right on inside the compound of the police stations to be able to improve their weapons handling skills. Enemy threats. This was the period of time in Iraq where it went from very kind of rudimentary, bury a howitzer round in the dirt or in garbage, and then blow it up remotely with a hard wire, to really the ultimate troop killer, quite honestly. When we first got there, we were on the lookout for the vehicle-borne IEDs, and in fact, that's what engaged my convoy on the way through Baghdad. In fact, I had to look for the same kind of model of Mercedes-Benz, but it was just because of the environment and the tanks that had smashed down the side, the median rails for safety reasons, because they plant them on the inside of the rails. Well, that allowed any type of vehicle-borne IED to sit there and wait for a convoy, and then quick jut in the median and come right across and explode. And thankfully, I know our gunner was only wounded slightly because he detonated it just prior to T-boning the Humvee, but it was serious enough. The RPG. One thing that we really learned is when we're at our police stations, you got to watch the kids. If the kids are around playing, you're probably pretty good. You're probably pretty safe. And in this instant, where one of our squads was at a river patrol station, there were kids playing around, and the squad leader was in talking to the station commander, and he got a call from one of the gunners that said, "Hey, all of a sudden, all the kids are gone, and it's quiet out there." And as soon as he got off the horn with his squad leader, out from between two cars, an enemy fighter just kind of got out, squatted down, and shot an RPG round and took off his left arm. And thankfully, it was just because of the round going through his arm, but the detonator didn't explode, or he would have been killed. But one of the true heroes of our deployment was, right now it's Chief Warrant Officer Andy Tepfer. And without him and his fast actions about applying a tourniquet to Adam Stamfus, we would have had a death casualty during that deployment. So I give him a hug every time I see him. And so the explosively formed projectile was basically kind of revealed to us during our deployment. And I'll never forget the meeting I was in with the other battalion commanders, and I was the only MP company commander as part of that brigade, and it was something that you just didn't know what to say, because effectively there was no armor that we had that would protect against this. It will kill when it hits, whether it's an M1 tank or a Humvee. And so our soldiers, used different techniques, sped up, drove slow. I mean, it was a matter of, do we drive slow and try to look for this type of threat, or do we drive fast and hope that we can not get them to time us? So it was like the ultimate turkey shoot going through Baghdad with this type of system. And then our entry control points and our traffic control points, our greatest threat there was not only the vehicle-borne IEDs, but also the snipers up on the roofs in a metro urban area. It was just a matter of time. We had other soldiers from different units just on a normal TCP end up getting shot and killed. And it was horrible, because you just didn't know where it was coming from, whatever room. So they had to search, do a cordon search of pretty much every building. And this was the conglomerate of really enemy threats, the sectarian violence between the Shia and Sunni, the clashes that we got between the foreign fighters from the Sudanese that were coming in because it was the show in town. They wanted to come in and be part of something, to either kill a member of a coalition force, or, depending on their religious and radical beliefs, they wanted to be part of that. The Mujahideen, radical Islamists, were in that area as well as the Iranian-based Shia Badr Corps. And the Iranian Badr Corps is really what when we started seeing the EFPs, and that was so whenever we could track these folks down was a win. I just wanted to cover a few unit accomplishments, and this really goes to the credit of the 152 soldiers that I had the honor to lead, is based on their civilian skill sets and the way they work together. The Colonel Teradash gave us the largest and most diverse area in Baghdad. So we had the very urban area in Karada, but also the very rural area, open area, and really the greatest number of Iraqi police stations, with 15 in one district headquarters. And you know, our soldiers did such an amazing job doing that. They conduct over 350 combat missions. And one of the things that I found, our battalion commander wanted us to take off. We had our branch on our collar at that time, and he said, you know, you're able to put on the cross pistols. I said, you know what, sir, that's great, but I'm an artilleryman, and quite honestly, you know, maybe it's just the environment or the dynamic of the active duty military police and their relationship with their maneuver counterpart, but when you walked into a maneuver battalion commander's talk, and he, you know, you might have had the MP Broussard on, but when he saw the cross cannons on your collar, it was a positive. I mean, he knew that he could give you his intent, and you'd probably be able to understand and follow it and get the mission done. So that was really an asset to us, is to, you know, not give in to the peer pressure, I guess, of putting on cross pistols, which we weren't MPs, we were just doing the role. Secured an inner portion of Baghdad during the first free elections. As I mentioned, you'll see, you know, remember the pictures of people wearing with the purple fingers and stuff, and that was just an amazing day. And it really a triumph for the Iraqi police that we formed a relationship with, to be able to secure that, so there was no attacks within the inner city of Baghdad, and that was phenomenal, and that really went a long ways into boosting their confidence for the rest of our deployment. We did have a mission for a little while to transport high-value detainees from Camp Cropper to the central court in Iraq, and Major Dave Johansson was in charge of that mission and did a phenomenal job, and they prosecuted a lot of detainees and got a lot of information out of them. One of our squads came across an ambush at a traffic circle, a civilian convoy of supplies coming to resupply a camp, and insurgents ambushed them, and the squad came around and protected that convoy. And amazingly enough, they had the little, it wasn't GoPros yet, but they had little video cameras, and it's one of the more interesting moments, because you could just hear the rounds pinging off the turret, and the sergeant is yelling, "They're behind the van, should I shoot?" And the squadron's like, "Get them!" And it was that moment that do. And you know, when we pulled up, they were pulling insurgents out of the trees, out of the palm grove, and really quite an amazing a day and event for that squad. And I'm so proud of him. But he was awarded a Bronze Star with V device for those heroics in that squad, and then 3 more were awarded ARCOMs with V. So very, very proud of that. As a unit, we were awarded the Meritorious Unit Citation, and I put this on there because it was by the sheer grace of God that we didn't have someone killed. And like I said, if it wasn't for Andy Tepfer, we would have had one. And not only him, but there was a couple others that were severely injured as well. So, as I don't know what I don't know what that would have meant for the leaders of the unit and myself included if we would have had casualty, but it certainly wouldn't be, I wouldn't have the same perspective as I do. And I know with sometimes during that deployment, there was every unit commander had to give a memorial address, and I remember not wanting to be unprepared for that, so trying to write one, and the day we left was the day I tore that thing up, and just really thankful. So again, of these 152 soldiers, there's 150 still with us today. One was killed in an accident when he fell down a flight of stairs by accident, and the other one was shot on the freeway during a high-speed chase after an altercation with his ex-wife. And but I couldn't be prouder. And this was the kind of the mural that was kind of depicts some of the activities that we did. And General Erlinson, I know when we got back to Fort Dix to see your smiling face, and it was great to be home. So I can't express appreciation enough for how Minnesota supported us and got us ready to do our mission, which was ever evolving, and get home safely. So without further ado, any questions?
So I remember it seemed like the ETAB battery was deployed every 6 months or something. It was just a ridiculous number of deployments. What about this group? How many guys had been deployed already, and and then since then have they deployed again?
Every soldier I had, it was their first deployment. Since then, yes, many of them were still in the battalion when they deployed to Kuwait, and then others moved on to ETAB as well, and deployed with that unit as well as the division deployment to Basra. So.
This is one of the reasons why it's so important to capture this kind of information, because I would tell you 10 to 15 years from now, if Aaron was downstairs here telling a new soldier that he was an artilleryman doing MP duties in Baghdad, he'd look at him like he was a deer in the headlights, say he was crazy. But the truth of the matter is our soldiers were up to the test and did a fantastic job. Just a short, kind of a funny story because it still exists today. But I had the privilege to meet these guys when they came back out of Fort Dix when they redeployed. And didn't keep them very long, thanked them for what they had done, etc. And they hung around after we met in some kind of a tin hut of some kind. And they hung around. The only question I had was, can we get rid of this damn start patch and wear the red bull patch? Well, I said, shit, I'm the commander, you bet you can. Well, that didn't go over real well, did it, Don? And it's still an issue today, but
yeah, they knew the Red Bull patch well over there, sir.
Yeah. But they're not wearing it anymore, are they?
No.
No.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, sir.